Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia Ward Brewer. Today, on the last day of Women's History Month, I want to applaud all the women in Grand Rapids who are currently working to break down barriers and to fight for the rights of others. I hope that the trail we leave today will make it easier for those who follow us. As Black women, we have unique experiences in terms of our race, our gender, our roles in society, our physical appearances, the way we talk, and even our hair. By no means are we a monolith, but we do have some struggles that are specifically unique to Black women. This is why I have dedicated work and time to trace the steps of Black women from our history, especially during the Progressive Era, which was roughly 1890s to 1920s. There was widespread social and political reform in America during that time, and Black women were finding their voice. For instance, here in Grand Rapids, Emma Ford, Mary Roberts Tate, and Minnie Goggins were founding members of the Married Ladies 19th Century Club, later called the 19th Century Club. Formed in 1894, the mere name of this club clashed with stereotypes and negative portrayals of Black women often reported in newspapers during that time. Formed less than 30 years after the Civil War and 26 years before women gained the right to vote, this group of women were prominent members of the Grand Rapids community who advocated for the uplift of the Black race with their motto, "Lifting as we climb." They also spoke against racial and civil injustices and were advocates for women's rights and education. This is Hattie Beverly. In 1899, she became the first African-American woman to teach in Grand Rapids Public Schools. Born in Milwaukee in 1874, she dreamed of being a teacher. So in 1897, she became the first African-American to enter the Grand Rapids Public Schools Teacher Cadet Training Program. She did extremely well in school, but when she finished the program, some school board members questioned whether or not an African-American should be teaching white students. After some protests and debates, she was allowed to teach, and she taught at Congress Elementary School. After 2 years of teaching, Beverly resigned, got married, and gave birth to one daughter before sadly dying of tuberculosis at the age of 30. The Grand Rapids Study Club. Early American women in Grand Rapids formed several literary and social clubs during the Progressive Era, including the Grand Rapids Study Club. Founded in 1904, the Grand Rapids Study Club was a spin-off of the previous club mentioned, but for younger women. The club is still active today and it retains its original motto, rowing, not drifting. The Grand Rapids Study Club was formed to educate and unite women in their efforts towards personal, home, and community advancement. They were a moral compass for young women migrating to Grand Rapids during the 20th century. They were originally called the Grand Rapids Study Class Club, and these brilliant and ambitious women were not only women of high moral standards, they were also civically and politically involved. Many of the members ran for both public office and pursued careers outside of the home. Club members were also encouraged to be benevolent and patriotic. They had fundraisers to support religious organizations and support soldiers in both World War I and II. The Grand Rapids Study Club was one of 5 organizations here that hosted the Michigan Federation of Colored Women's Club Convention in 1907. There was much overlap in the clubs, while the African-American population at that time was less than 1,000. The NAACP. While there were 3 women involved in forming the national NAACP, including Mary White Ovington, Ida B. Wells, and Mary Church Terrell, There were also 2 women among the founders of the Grand Rapids branch in 1999. I'm still working to find out their names. Here are some rapid highlights of a few other African American women born in the Progressive era. Hazel Grant. In 1932, Hazel Grant became the first African American woman to be hired as the registrar at City Hall in the city clerk's office. She held that position for 31 years. She joined the NAACP in 1922 and served as president for 2 terms. She was a member of the study club. Sarah Glover. Sarah Glover moved to Grand Rapids from Alabama and joined the NAACP in 1925. And she became the first woman president of the organization in 1933. Sarah was also the first Black to attend and graduate from the Grand Rapids Junior College nursing program. Helen Claytor began working for the YWCA in 1928. Her work brought her to Grand Rapids in 1943, where she was elected president of the Grand Rapids YWCA in 1949. She was the first African American woman to serve nationally in this capacity. In 1967, she was elected to the National Board of Directors and served as its president until 1973, when she retired. In the late 1940s, Helen Claytor was appointed to a committee to study racial problems in the city of Grand Rapids. After months of hard work, the committee gave its report to a skeptical city commission. The facts and statistics in the report were so startling to the commission and to the community that the Human Relations Commission was formed. The commission evolved into the Office of Equal Opportunity, now the Office of Equity and Engagement. Ethel Cole was a humanitarian. Cole's campaigning for human rights began while attending high school when she was refused service at a local ice cream parlor. Her family sued and won the case. Throughout her life, Cole was active in the NAACP, Urban League, and Family Life Council. At the age of 68, as a Vista volunteer, Cole taught English to Latino and Vietnamese children. In 1951, she ran for the Grand Rapids Charter Commission, thus becoming one of the first Black women to run for elected office in the city of Grand Rapids. She was also active in the Grand Rapids Study Club. In 1955, Harriet Woods Hill became the first African American female police officer and began her career in the juvenile division of the GRPD. In 1977, she became the first female detective on the police force. In 1951, Hill was the first African American woman to run for school board. That's all I have for now. And remember, we don't know what we don't know. So let's evolve together. Good night.